Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the New Media Show. Of course, my name is Todd Cochrane. I want to welcome you to the show today. Got a great lineup. Got a great guest this morning, but before we do that introduction, good morning, Rob. How are you?
Doing great, Todd. It's great to be back on the New Media Show, doing another episode and talking to some cool technology person that's joining us from Clammer. I'm excited to dive into that app and that experience, but Seattle's doing good today. It's a little cloudy, but other than that, it's great to be here, Todd.
Well, thanks so much, and it's a little bit mayhem here. We have a high school graduation party at the house tomorrow night. My mom, sister, and two of my nieces arrive this evening, so it's essentially officially graduation week here at the Cochrane household. So, going to be a busy week, but that being said, I want to welcome our guest. And Rob, why don't you do the honors here?
It's great to have on Parvizi.
See, you can't say it. You can't say it. You can't.
We were doing it before the show.
I totally blew it, guys.
Parvizi. I'll introduce myself.
I told you can't say it 10 times fast. So.
I had it all set to do it right, too.
It's always the worst when you're really, really over-prepared.
Just go with the flow, right? Yeah.
And I'm the worst at names, so I kind of...
Yeah, I know.
You guys are approaching today with trepidation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good morning, Parviz. It's obvious. I'm assuming Italian. Is that where the...
No, Persian.
Persian.
Yeah. Persian. Okay. And we should probably say he's with Clammer, which is a new app,
with Clammer.
That's come on the scene that helps people share virally short clips from podcasts.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting app. And really, I think if you think about it, Todd, I mean, it's been something that people have wanted to do for a long time. It's actually getting into the content and kind of snipping out, highlights from it and sharing it and creating kind of a viral sharing type of experience around audio podcasts. So I think it's a great idea, and welcome to the show.
And
thanks.
And just before we started, we were just talking about it a little bit, and he says, "Did you get the update?" And I was like, "No." So I'm sitting here on my phone right now, trying to grab the update while we're on. So I guess for the folks that don't know, why don't you talk about the app specifically and what it does? I have to apologize to everyone today. My normal share screen sharing system is not. Did I say that right too? Is not working. So I won't be able to bring up a third-party screen or actually a website today. But go ahead and talk to us about the app.
Sure. So Clammr is a bite-sized audio platform. You get a continuous stream of short audio clips. They're capped at 18 seconds, and they're personalized to your preferences. You can listen to them as a power feed, so you can think of things like entertainment, newsy content, music. You can also click on them to launch something longer, so often a podcast, or it can also support a YouTube pop-up, music, etc. Our real motivation in creating Clammer was to make audio more shareable and more discoverable. One of the tricky things about audio is there's, first of all, a lot of it, and often the unit size is quite long, certainly in podcasts. So our thought is if you actually shrink down the unit size to something shareable and bite-sized, that actually increases the velocity of how audio circulates, makes it more shareable. So on Clammer, the listening experience is this feed that you can dive into. There's also a creation aspect where you can pull in existing audio, you can do your own audio, and you can multi-track and basically grab things that you love and share them out with friends, and add your own voiceover, add your own voice intro, and share them within Clammer, but also everything on Clammer is open. So you can share the Clammers out to Facebook, Twitter, email. We even have the Clammers available as embeddable widgets. So you can put them on Tumblr or on a WordPress site, for example, as well. I'll pause there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you also have you kind of have a little bit of a social network kind of functionality in there too. If I pull up on the screen here, and I know we can't do a screen share, but you create a user profile and it tracks your clips that you pull out of podcasts, and it has friends that follow you, and so it's more than just a sharing platform. It's really kind of its own little social network, and I know a lot of apps are adding that functionality is to create that viral sharing and kind of build users on the platform. I mean, so what's your kind of vision on why you combine those two things together instead of just making a simple app that just enables the sharing? What's the thinking behind that?
It's a great observation, Rob. Absolutely, from the get-go. Our founding vision was making audio easier to discover and easier to share, making audio social. Because when you think about the different formats that are out there, there are, first of all, social flavors of every type of format, but also bite-sized flavors of every format. So text has Twitter, images have Instagram, video has Vine. There's nothing really that's worked for audio to date. The thinking behind integrating that, there are a couple of things to it. First of all, one of the big motivations was making it easier to discover things. And social validation, in our minds, is an important aspect of discovery rather than being purely algorithmic. So anytime you're listening to a Clammr and you press the like button, everybody who's following you gets that in their feed. So we wanted a basic profiling aspect in order to allow for folks to, in a sort of fairly automated way, get things bubbling up to them that their friends liked. The second aspect, which is a feature that we've kept purposely a little bit hidden just to see how it played out, is there's a messaging feature in Clammr too. So you can throw Clammrs back and forth to friends and basically have a private chat string with them, with the Clammrs that you're sharing, and then text that you write. That's actually been really neat to watch that just organically grow on the platform. It's generated a lot of stickiness. People who engage in messaging basically are hooked on Clammr. And that's something, those community features are things that we'll be pulling up over time. And Rob, you're just holding that up to the screen right there. Exactly. And if you click on, some of those are notifications, but if you click on, say, the message I sent you, people will see the chat string that was between us, essentially.
So it's a little bit like Twitter.
Yeah.
I know it's a little blurry, but yeah.
And Twitter's a great analogy in that there's a public aspect to it, and Twitter people use in interesting ways. Some people use it essentially as an RSS feed. Others use it for the direct messaging component as well.
So what I'm trying to do here, guys, while you're talking, is bring up another computer so we can get a screen up. But I think the thing that as I have played with it is that the and I know you guys are working on the UI and trying to make the experience more robust. But why don't you talk someone through the process on what they're going to need to do if they want to Clammr their favorite shows, and basically how a listener can actually use the app. And you don't have to go in too much detail, but step them through that a little bit.
Yeah. So we really created a whole host of options to really be present where people are consuming and how people have their audio set up. So the easiest example, since we're talking about podcasts, is you hit the microphone button. So you go to menu, hit the microphone button, and there's a button called My Podcasts. And you click that, and you'll get a list of all of the podcasts that have been downloaded on your phone. So we're integrated with the Apple Podcast Player. So anything you've downloaded in there is available. You click on any episode that you want, and that'll pull in the audio track for that episode. And then there's a cropper that you can move around to get to the right spot. You can preview the audio as it's playing. It doesn't have to be 18 seconds. You can make it shorter than that. And when we pull in that show or that episode, we pull in all the metadata for it. So we automatically populate the description, the image, and most importantly, we populate a hear more link that'll have people get the full thing. So yeah, Rob, if you press that, just that podcast little subway sign there, it'll be the orange one, the fourth one from the left.
Yeah, for some reason. Okay, there we go. And it's pulling in some podcasts here.
Exactly. So, and then if you click any one of those episodes.
So, and then, let me pull it in here. So there's an episode there.
So for those watching, they'll get the benefit here. And so now what the system will do, first it'll say, do you want to pull in the metadata? And you want to say yes to that typically. So you just click that yes button on the right.
Okay.
Great. And that's the track. And you can then scrub around in there, move around, and grab the right spot. There's also, you see, one of the upgrades, Todd, was we have a scrubber underneath that lets you just move a little faster within that track to the right spot.
Oh, I see that.
Makes that less manual. And so you grab the right spot, and then you can just post that. But you also have the option of multi-tracking. So things you can do are, you can just add your own voiceover to it. You can add a voice intro to it. You can even do some interesting mashing up where maybe you'll add some beats that might be interesting. We've seen people doing fun stuff like with straight news stories, they're adding rap beats underneath and creating new type of content. But essentially, if you're happy with what you grabbed here, let's say, Rob, you scrubbed around in there, pulled that red button around a little bit to get to the right spot, you would just hit next, and then you would post it.
Okay, next is right above up there. Yeah, I'd be posting that live.
Yep, and then right, and then you would I don't know if you want to do that. You'll see it's not quite clear on the screen, but basically on the right side there are icons for Twitter and Facebook. And so when you post to Clammr, you automatically post to Twitter and Facebook. You can unclick them to not do that. You're basically mapping out to your existing social graph as well. And what gets posted is this short clip, the title, description, but also this hear more link that then folks would click to hear the whole podcast. So it can be a nice way to turn the audience for a podcast into its biggest promoters and a bit of a megaphone for it. Right now, a lot of podcasters really have to do all their own promotion. They're the ones who are shouting from the rooftops. And we've seen a whole host of podcasters actually creating Clammers because it's a nice way to disaggregate things from their shows, but also starting to encourage some of their audience members. Now, this isn't going to be everyone. It's going to be the super fans, but with a lot of user-generated media, it really is this tiny share that's generating a lot of the content that's most viewed. So it creates a path for a level of social viral distribution of podcasts that hasn't really existed to date.
All right.
Yeah, and you can only clip out 18 seconds, if that's correct. Yeah.
That's right. You can only grab 18 seconds. You can multi-track, so you can grab different pieces from different places and stitch them together. But yeah. And you can see an example of a, Todd, I saw that you finally were able to get your browser up. One of the widgets, which is great. Someone like a TechCrunch, for example, they put our widget up on their Tumblr feed. They pinned it at the top, and I think they've had some new posts since then. But you would see one implementation of it there. If you went to techcrunch.tumblr.com, for example, you'd see the Clammer widget up there as one way in which it shows up. Obviously, on Twitter, if you searched for Clammer, you'd see a whole host of people and what they posted as well. Typically, it's actually the creators who posted.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been seeing too. Is that a lot of the creators are posting? Do you think this has become a more of a creators tool at this point, or?
It's a little of both. It's early days. Since NMS a few weeks ago, when we really publicly came out, we've had over 1,300 creators post things on Clammer, which has been great. It's been this really nice big rush of folks. It's varied. I'll break it down into a few categories. One is people who actually have some sort of content already, podcasts, music, etc., repurposing that. The second is folks who aren't who would like to be creators, but this is actually their outlet. Right? So they don't have a podcast, but they actually want to do a mini podcast. A hybrid of that is, somebody you guys sure know well, Elsie Escobar. She has a couple of podcasts, but she actually decided to use Clammr to create a mini podcast. Just something that's not excerpts of her shows, but just these little mini clips that together add up to be this really interesting listening experience. And then you have just the pure fans, and they're doing interesting things like they're taking highlights, but they're also doing some really interesting remixing. So there was there's a fun little new podcast called Jock and Nerd, and it's about comics, and they are comic books, and one of their fans took clips of their show, put them in a row together, and then made basically a rap with it, and just kind of had fun with it. And that's the kind of thing they were delighted by that. That you open up some of the creativity of the fans to take what you're doing and promote it using their own voice.
Yeah, it does seem like that the leading edge of this would be the content creators,
for sure,
getting in there and sharing the content that they have as a kind of viral technique for themselves, and then hopefully over time that would trigger the audiences to get in there and do the same based on the exposure that the show host would have given to their community to the tool, right? So.
Absolutely, they're savvy, right? For them, it's pretty easy. There's a back end. There's a back end publisher portal that we have that's off the web, so you can just quickly upload MP3s there and just cut them out of your show. So we see a lot of folks doing that. You're absolutely right. That's the leading end. That's who we really went to target in terms of our outreach, because it was behavior that wasn't too far from what they're already engaging in.
But I think you touched on a really important point of that this tool could become really a separate content creation process. I was thinking about it a lot that shows like to, I did it, with my old radio show, and I know we talked about this years ago, when I would play a clip from another show in my show.
Sure.
Right.
And I could see that being a use case for this as well, in creating conversations between shows. That's a little easier to share as well as to create. So, in some ways I see this as a two-headed product, right? Ultimately it will choose its own pathway here, but it does seem like there's the opportunity there that this is a creation, really a new type of content creation platform as well.
And I think too, it can tie back to if I have a little bit of a clip that I want to share, I can do that. I'd like to see the clips be bigger.
We've talked about that a lot. Yeah.
And because when I'm doing a news story, it's a couple minutes, and if I can't clip a couple of minutes, then it makes it a little harder to really kind of use it as a AKA promotion tool.
I think that's fair. Well, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to mention, Todd, that I think that the reason for that is that I think that they're trying to be consciously kind of concerned about not taking too much of people's content and doing this with it, just because they are keeping a copy of it on the server, so they're actually hosting the snippet of this, and I think that there is some concern, and I don't, if you could share a little bit about that concern, or if really legally it's going to be possible to do this in a longer clip.
Yeah, copyright's one of these things. There are no bright line rules, right? A lot of it comes down to these lines around to what extent are you transforming it, etc. Our motivation with the 18 really had to do with the product primarily. Now, the legal point, I think, is helpful in the sense that we, from the get-go, designed this in a way to be respectful of the rights of owners. It's something that when you create a Clammer, there's attribution, there's a link back. It's additive to anybody who is having their content promoted by their fans. But the primary motivation really was just more around the product. And I can tell you guys how we landed at the 18. A lot of people ask us if that's helpful. It's kind of an interesting process. When you look at psychological research on the human working memory, i.e. short-term memory, it comes in around 7 to 9 seconds typically, most of the research out there. then if you look at Twitter and you translate their 140 characters at the typical spoken word rate that you see in things like audiobooks, that comes in right around 10 seconds. And so we, very early product development, we tried 12 seconds. Because these are coming in sequentially, we thought we'd add a little bit more of time. And we saw that folks were rushing their speaking rate to try to fit more in, and also folks found it a little bit taxing. So we then went and read out loud and recorded a whole host of New York Times articles, actually, and marked at what point we understood the main point. Not the topic, but the actual main point. And that consistently came in under 18 seconds, and that's how we landed at the 18. We also added this more advanced setting in there where the user can add a delay of up to 2 seconds between the clammers for folks who just need a little bit of time for things to sink in. But that's and our thought was, if a source that is well thought through, reasonably well thought through, reasonably well written, like the New York Times, can express a thought within that 18 seconds, that's a good benchmark. I think anytime you add a constraint, you're going to leave certain uses out for sure. And Todd, you referenced a lot of the news stories. I want a good couple minutes. It's really that hear more button that enables access to that. So in addition to some of what I pointed out about pulling in from things like podcasts, you can pull in tracks from Dropbox or any track that's on your email. You can just long press it and pull that into the soundboard as well. And basically, if you have a link to that track anywhere on the open internet, including just having it on your Dropbox as a .mp3 link, folks can get access to that longer thing. So that's how we thought about the kind of longer content, making it accessible as opposed to actually putting it directly into the listening stream.
I gotcha. One thing that I've always thought is that if there is a way to engage the audience with just a taste,
Right.
it's good.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both have talked that at some point you guys probably should try to move this out of the app and maybe even to the desktop or into other apps. And I know the challenges with getting app developers to implement stuff. They are they're on their own agenda, and
Sure.
it has to serve them not necessarily financially, but they're not often. Well, you just know it's just a challenge to get into other apps. So, do you think then that the next frontier for you guys is the desktop, or is it in other apps, or where do you think your next frontier is?
Yeah, a few things there. Definitely the desktop. So we're working on making a fully functional version of Clammer on the desktop that's mobile responsive, so Android users can access it as well. Before we then look at we move to an Android version. So that'll be coming out kind of late spring, early summer. We're pretty far along with that, and that then opens up some nice, because we'll have the same set of creation tools there. That opens us up to then embedding in other experiences. And having a set of tools that app developers can adopt, as well as I think some of the folks who are in the kind of hosting and kind of content upload space for podcasts, opening up some tools for them where, as part of your control panel, when you put up your podcast, having a little button where you can, in a pretty easy workflow process, just while you're in the process of putting your podcast up, create your 5 clammers and post those. And again, you're posting them to Clammer, but you're also posting them to Twitter or Facebook at the same time. So those are a couple of the areas that we're looking at, and right in line, Todd, with some of your thinking. It obviously makes sense to go where folks are actually at scale.
Have you ever thought of, and this is because I just think ultimately this is where the future's at, and I understand wanting, having the content creator be able to do that, but have you ever thought of setting it up so that there could be like an API, something that could be maybe your own RSS extensions that basically say here and here, here's the in, here's the out, and the content creator can actually send you that signal via an API, or do you think at this point it's just going to be a manual tool? Because my thought process is, if I can tell you essentially where within the RSS feed or some sort of a signal that makes it easy, and this should be something that the content creator is going to do during the production. And I also would think that you would, in my kind of workflow, I wouldn't necessarily want those to go out right now. I'd want those to be scheduled so that an hour from now, 5 hours from now, they would boom, 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 we would be sending stuff out.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be a good solution for like a Hootsuite or something like that as well. It could be, if I start to think about this more in line with what people do every day today with sharing, the sharing buttons for Facebook and Twitter, right? That creates a little pop-up, and you do kind of the customization to it, and you hit submit, and it basically, that kind of experience could be integrated into web players. It could be integrated into web pages, whatever, that creates this kind of this ability that people are used to right now of hitting a button on a page. It has a pop-up. You basically customize what the tweet would be or the Facebook post. This functionality could be applied to this as well, I believe.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of thing that, as we wrap up the web version, the creation tools there very easily extend to then making those accessible via the button. And so you guys will be seeing that sooner rather than later. Just to give a little bit of a sneak preview, I think Todd, you mentioned a couple of things as well on the scheduling. The Hootsuite, the publisher portal today actually has scheduling. So if you create, and that was something early on that was quite apparent that we should do. So even for folks who use the phone to make the Clammers, they can log into the publisher portal and then just change the publication time. We'll work it into the app as well at some point. And then, on that point about, hey, look, could we really automate this? Could we just have a set of standard tags that are in the RSS feed that are start and stop times maybe to begin with, and then even over time maybe even start stop for when you're stitching things together? That's definitely in the kind of thought process. It's the kind of thing where, as you know well, as somebody who started things, you always want to make sure you're right sizing your offering to what a lot of folks are going to do. And so as right now we're building relationships, getting to know the community well. We were super delighted that a set of podcasters just decided to create a private Facebook group to talk about Clammer, which was great. So that's the kind of thing that I think is really cool, and the side of me that likes creating systems and processes thinks is cool. We'll want to test that and just make sure there are enough users of it. It would be really cool, though, right? If you could just, with the stroke of a few keyboard buttons, create Clammers because you're just tagging stuff, right? And not having to drag inside of a UI. I think that's what you were getting at.
Right. Well, I've been trying here to get the screen sharing to work, and I think I'm batting 1,000 this morning, so I'm going to give up.
I'm batting 1,000 on failing. Oh, bummer.
Yeah, it's not going well. When it rains, it pours. So, well, it sounds pretty. Go ahead, Rob. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I think our guest was trying to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say the Twitter. It's a bummer. I would have loved to show you the Twitter feed. I think that's where you just see a lot of people putting up a lot of interesting stuff, and it shows up pretty nicely, actually.
Does it go like a card? Is it go in as a card then on the Twitter feed?
Exactly. It's a card with the image and a play button on it, and you can play it natively right within Twitter on the desktop. On the mobile application, Twitter hasn't opened some of that up yet, so it looks like a link, and then it'll just pop up another Twitter page where you can play it. We'd love to get to know some folks at Twitter who can help us get a more native card going on the mobile phone.
Yep, I agree. One thing that I think too you'll see on Twitter is when it goes up as a link, I think you guys are going to see some weird traffic coming in too. So as you guys are and this just goes back to some experience we've seen, and probably the audience isn't going to care, but when you're
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because it basically everybody and their brother indexes Twitter, and some of them will just download the file, even though that's not. It's really bizarre. It really, really is.
Can you say more about that? I think Rob, you were saying something. What is the what happens there?
Well, there's a lot of kind of bots out there that are looking at Twitter, and I think it was at Google just made some announcements just here recently about how they've struck a deal with Twitter to index more tweets.
Right.
So I think that Todd, that whole issue could get worse because of that, right? That there's bots out there that are looking at these tweets, and then they're just triggering downloads to try and run up the numbers. And Todd, I mean, if you trace back, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. I mean, is there like paid services that are doing this to try and drive up numbers, or what's kind of the business model here?
I think, well, if there is someone that's trying to drive up the numbers, we haven't detected them yet, but we know that we put in over 100 filters to basically discount the bots that are, and it's Apple does a index of Twitter, and you think, okay, why are they doing that? But
they have a search engine,
yeah. So they actually, so there's everybody and their brothers indexing Twitter, and they follow every link, and they some of the bots are stupid, and they actually download the media file when it's not a human. Either the app isn't smart enough to know that this is an MP3. Because traditionally, a lot of people don't post audio links to files in Twitter, and it's I'm sure the bots haven't been programmed to ignore them. So and if you're just doing one tweet, it's not a big deal. You're gonna. Yeah. But what happens is it's where someone's actually trying to beat the system, and they're using 100 Twitter accounts, and they're sending out 100 tweets every 5 minutes. That's where the problem is.
It's a spamming technique. I mean, we've seen this technique with search engine optimization for years. Of the kind of link farms, and it's just a hack on the system.
And all I'm saying is that you guys should just look at your statistics as people are clicking on, because I'm sure you're tracking that. Yep. Is to put put filtering in place to say, okay, or is this
legit?
Is this legit? And what we have found is about 1 out of 100 is.
No kidding.
Legitimate? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the stats that Twitter natively reports are not necessarily filtered.
I don't use Twitter stats. We do our own. We do our own internal filtering. So.
All right. Good.
Yeah. They probably have a different motivation than we do on those stats.
But and I think just in it, what it really is if being that you're hosting the media, just look at the log files. You'll be able to. It doesn't take too much of a genius to look at the log files to say that's not a human. And you look at user agents, and did it come from from an iOS device? Did it come from a browser? And then all of a sudden you're going to see. Google, you're going to see stuff from Yahoo, you're going to see stuff from every major search engine, China, because everyone's it's a hot destination, so people are indexing the site.
Well, I think also, Todd, what's going on is I think a lot of these companies are looking at that as signals of what's happening in the world, right? They're maybe not doing it in any kind of malicious way. They're just looking for trend lines that maybe can support their content offerings, or how they're positioning promotions, and how they're positioning what they do around marketing. And it could be just, these bots are being driven by the marketing and social media teams at these big companies.
Right.
Just to know what's going on.
Sure.
So anyway, it's interesting, it's great to have the innovation in the space, and I think Clammr is one of is at this point, from my mind, it's the kind of the leading edge of the innovation in the space right now around trying to take this content that is somewhat difficult for a new listener to get into,
right.
to find out what's there. I've always felt from day one that there was a huge need for sampling in podcasting, to let users easily taste the product, if you want to call it a product, before they give a major endorsement, which is going in and following or favoriting it or downloading it, which is a big commitment, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you look at some of the statistics, just some very baseline facts. If you look at census data, structurally there are 4 hours a day when we can't consume visual media readily. Morning routine, drive time, housework, shopping, etc. And current broadcast radio has some of the lowest affinity scores of any media. So there's a lot of great, and then you looked at some of the stats you guys have shared, at NMS and other places around just the number of podcasts that are being created. There's a lot of great content. There's a lot of audio only time out there, and there's just this bit of a market mismatch in terms of really being able to find it, to share it, to get it socially validated by people. So we think there's a real interesting opportunity there, and to actually smooth that kind of process between people who need stuff to consume and then people who have great content but don't have a way of getting it out there. And even some of the stats on podcast growth, I think there's obviously a lot of hype right now around podcasts, and the penetration's grown, like that 15 going up to 17, that, folks like Edison, you guys, others have cited. At the same time, what was interesting to me was the download numbers grew much faster. The download numbers are like 35 to 40% growth per year. So in a sense, part of me asks, is this about an intensification of a focused audience, or is it really about truly the masses getting in? And we think for this to become really mass, there needs to be a better way of discovering and sharing some of the great content. Otherwise, it may just be the same audience kind of talking to itself.
So are you trying to say that podcasting is like an addictive drug? Is that what it is? And it just gets, you kind of move from this drug to the next, more severe drug, and it's like going from listening to our show and then going to Serial or something like that, and you just get more passionate about it? Is that what happened?
Yeah, and that's obvious to you guys. I mean, what was neat about some of those Edison numbers is, the top line said, oh, gee, the average podcast listener listens to 6 podcasts. But the median was 3. Actually, 60% of listeners listen to 3 or less, right? So it's this kind of really addicted set that are driving some of those download numbers up. It just intuitively, that's what is clearly going on when you just look at the penetration numbers and how, they're going up, but not that much at such a high pace. So I think the question for the industry is, obviously it's great to have the super fans and it's great to have the drug addicts of podcasts. But at a certain point, those guys are going to get tapped out. And so how do you actually kind of bear hug more of the overall audience?
Grow the base, of users, and Todd and I have pondered that one for years on this show. Of how to actually grow the overall audience. Now, granted, I think at some point you're exactly right. We're going to peak on consumption with existing podcast listeners. They're all going to get so addicted that they're, who knows? Some of them may even perish on us. I don't know.
I think what you're seeing though is that, and I think radio and television is starting to see this as everyone's moving digital, and because not to say that TV and radio haven't been in the digital space, but podcasting's was born in the digital space. So we live it, breathe it. We know the ins and outs. So I don't think we have a problem. Some of us want to adapt to the mainstream, want to move into radio and TV, right. But while they're trying to get out. So I think because the young kids of today, I just look at my kids and I look at my oldest daughter. She doesn't have, a connected TV. She never was a cord cutter. She didn't have a cord to cut. it really
cord never is what they call it.
Yeah, cord never. They consume digital.
Cord what? Yeah.
Cord never.
Cord never. Yeah.
Yeah. Or cord what? Just what is a cord?
But in the end, what's going to happen is this space is going to grow no matter what, because as the people that have been born with a phone in their hand.
Right.
You see some kids that are literally born with a phone or tablet in their hand. The space is just going to grow, and the listener base is going to grow, because I think people are going to be seeking out content that they want to listen to, what they enjoy, what entertains them, just like we do in traditional media. If you think about the junk that's on TV, you got 1,000 channels of television, and I think I have 10 or 15 channels that I hover through.
And that whole kind of model that cable television has, you pay one flat fee and you get access to 800, 900 channels,
Right.
But just like you said, Todd, you probably watch maybe 2 or 3 channels primarily, and maybe you visit maybe 8 of those 800 channels ever.
Yep.
So it definitely screams to a different business model that needs to come, and I think we're starting to see that. And I think podcasting also is reflective of Uber trends that are happening around mobile and kind of context too. I think the breadth and depth of content makes it very, very conducive to the online experience, and how content is fragmenting and going very, very niche, and podcasting can scale with that much more than radio or TV can scale into niche programming. So I think it fits with how people are going to want to consume media in the future, and people are going to want to create it as well as consume it. And I think Clammr is a classic example of catering to both of those markets, of the creators and the consumers, and that line is blurring more every day.
Yeah. I was successful. Yeah. There's a tweet there's a Clammr tweet right there.
That's right. Then if you search for Clammr, you would just see a whole host of these out there that are right. If you just keep scrolling, exactly, there's New Media Show, and if you went to see a widget implementation, which I think is another neat thing that we're starting to see folks do. We've seen a number of podcasters take widgets of their Clammr feeds and put them on their web pages, with the idea being that somebody can go to my web page and just hear highlights of recent episodes and then just click in. And it's a way to kind of expose some of the catalog content. That guy was Jeffrey Marsh. He's a Vine user, actually, who a big Vine star, actually, who has decided to start expressing himself on Clammr. He does a lot of these kind of motivational tips. But it's definitely been really neat to see just folks hopping on and making it their own, in a sense.
The challenge with some of the widgets, and I just as a caution to WordPress users, is some of those Twitter widgets are pretty overhead intensive from a page loading standpoint. So read the reviews, and I use one on my website. But make sure that make sure as a podcaster that you're looking at the widget carefully that you load. Some of them are not very nice and can add as much as 50% load time to your web page.
To be clear, our widget is
you have a widget.
Yeah, we actually have on the open internet. Yeah, I'll give you an example. If you just go to techcrunch.tumblr.com, so that it's got its own native. It's got a player, and it's its own thing, and it's on the open internet. So anybody can create widgets, and you can make a widget out of an account, individual account, a channel. So a channel is a combination of accounts. You can also make widgets out of search terms, which is really neat. Basically, you could, let's say, type in the term Clinton and make a widget out of it. And then there's a live feed of every Clammr that's being created that has the term Clinton in it, if you're tracking presidential elections or whatever, which is pretty fun. Yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit, I think they have some newer stories there. But you'll see, keep going. It's gonna have a big play button on it, just under this one, I think.
Yep.
This one right here. Do you see how it has a play button?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that if you press that, you would then get an audio stream of TechCrunch stories that are on Clammer. You just need to turn on your sound. But then, and you see in this case, the way those are implemented, rather than a hear more button, there's a read more button. So the creator can choose what to link their Clammer to. So most people are going to link it to longer audio, but other folks will link it to a pop-up YouTube or a web page, just a straight web page. And we even see folks, like I talked to you about this, Rob, like Spreaker users, Spreaker creators create a link, and then it actually generates and opens up the Spreaker app and takes the user to the Spreaker app experience. We definitely wanted things to be quite open and not kind of treat Clammer as a walled garden.
So do you have instructions then on your website on how to set these up, set that specific widget up?
Yeah, so the website, if you go to publisher.clammer.com, we can do this live, it'll be fun. I'll maybe, actually, maybe we can just make up an account for you real quick. Test.
Let's see. Oh, it brings me to a login page.
Yeah, so use this.
We got to be careful because we're live. So if you share
no worries. Yeah, I'm just doing a fake one. So, boy, that username is taken up. Okay, try the username or the email toddtest@clammer.com. So TODDTEST@clammer.com.
Yep.
And just for your password, type in password.
All right, those of you that are online, be nice now. Don't go over here and they're watching this. So it took me to the home.
Yeah, and you don't have any. And if you actually refresh, you'll see. Yeah, so those are channels that you've subscribed to. I just subscribed to. You do a few fake ones,
right?
If you go up to widget on the upper, kind of on the upper bar,
yep.
You'll see a link there that says "Click on this widget creator," and there you can just—it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you dive. Yeah, you have like a drop down. And so you type in user, you can choose user. And for user, why don't we do TechCrunch? Just TECHCRUNCH. You can do whatever, though, really.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to type here, sorry. This computer's off to the side. Okay, and then get embed code.
Yep.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy, yeah. And that's on the, while we logged in, that URL is on the open internet, so you don't have to log into that. And so you can just grab that and embed that. And the other widget types, so a search type, you would just type in a search query.
Gotcha.
So in that case, Clinton. We also have a 45-minute YouTube workshop. Amazingly, actually, a lot of people have watched that whole thing. We had something like 500-600 people watching it. That thing goes through every single little detail of Clammer and a lot of the tips on how to think about using it in a more viral fashion, like call and response initiatives with your listeners and things like that, like encouraging your listeners to use a particular hashtag and then creating one of these widgets using that hashtag.
So folks are tying this right to their... Oh, this is cool. So that now I'm understanding more. So
let me show you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So then you basically you tie it to your channel or to user account, and then every time there's you post a new Clammer, it can go on the widget with it. It could be in the sidebar. You could make that an individual blog post.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so we're starting to see some people put it up on Tumblr, because it's a nice enhancement to Tumblr. We're starting to see folks putting it on their websites. If you go to one, there are a whole host of websites, but just one that pops to my mind is Sorgatron Media. Right, that's he's fun, right? Sorg's a fun guy.
So it's Swords. What is it? Swords of what's the website again?
Sorgatron. Sorgat.
Sorgatron. Huh.
Sorgatron. Yeah.
So
if you go ahead, Rob. Yep.
Oh, I was going to say. So the experience of the widget is to play these things in like a linear kind of playback experience. Is that what it is, or can you jump link to them in the actual widget itself to try and find separate Clammers?
You basically it is just a linear feed, Rob.
Okay.
And it's a feed that's things you've published as well as things you've pressed the like button on. So you can act as a curator. So
am I on the right site?
It looks like it. Yours is a little bit different than how mine appears. It almost looks like it's squished down, mobile responsive. Is it just sorgatronmedia.com? Is that what you're seeing on your...
I'm on sorgatron.com, not media.
Oh, yeah, sorgatronmedia.com.
But it's funny, it had a PodCamp Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it did. It did have it. I did laugh about that.
I think Sorg has both. So if you look on the right side under Store,
I see it.
You'll see, right? And so that'll just, if you press that, now he implemented in a really small way so that the text doesn't look beautiful there. But it'll just play that feed. And then you have that Hear More button right there that you can link to. Rob, the current widget implementation is a simple one where it's just that linear feed. There's a skip button, so you can skip through.
Oh, you can skip. Okay.
Yeah, you can skip them. Obviously, one nice enhancement over time will be something like a little mini playlist to get a view of what's coming up and to be able to kind of pop through that. But right now, I think a lot of folks are thinking it's a pretty neat enhancement to what's on their website, either as a podcaster or just as somebody, like a TechCrunch. They're playing around with their Tumblr feed. This is just a nice piece of media they can add on there.
So does it automatically, almost like a
refresh.
live feed? Does it automatically update based on Clammers being posted that map to its query?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
It sure does.
For those of you listening, we got the video screen sharing up at about the 45-minute mark. If you want to go back and look at the video and see what we shared, so
yeah.
So that's been this. Again, we wanted to be present where people would be consuming, and while we love people using the app, we get that different people need different things at different times, and so you can also email these things out and SMS them, and that'll pop up a little quick web version of the Clammer and play it for you right there as well.
Do you see any coming revenue models around this from the standpoint of, helping you, like maybe, is it offering a more of an enterprise solution here, or is there some sort of a model that you're kind of shooting for, or if you even want to talk about that yet, but I'm curious.
Yeah, we get the question a lot. How do you guys make money? We don't know. We can look. There are kind of 4, 5, 6 standard moves of ways you can make money, either in digital media or in apps or a combination of the two. Apps being a subset. The way we thought about it is it's hard enough to come up with a novel product and have that be something that people really get passionate about, and so. I think monetization is actually another aspect of product. And so we said, rather than trying to jam that in from the get-go, let's figure out a great user experience. You really put it rightly, Rob. We think of it as a two-sided market that we're trying to serve, the creators and the listeners, and often they'll converge. And so we're really trying to nail that first. And then I think if we create something that delights people, and so far we've seen just a really nice group starting to form, these 1,300 creators, the subset that are created this awesome Facebook group. We can then turn and really kind of in a collaborative way ask them and understand what are ways that we could make money that are additive.
Yeah, I can see, one idea that just comes to mind is, revenue model based on an in-app purchase of some sort around a feature or tracking of metrics or some revenue model that's embedded in the platform that doesn't preclude usage.
Exactly.
Maybe it's more advanced kind of corporate, maybe the enterprise kind of functionality, like I was saying earlier.
One of the challenges, though, too, especially from an advertising standpoint, is you could get because you're dealing with content, and the presumption that you're making money off someone's content. If you drop in advertising, then that opens up its own can of worms. The listeners don't care. I don't think per se it's the content hosts that would. Some would. So I guess too is and I know you've probably thought about this already, but is some sort of revenue share with the content creators probably, even if it's token, would probably go a long way into satisfying people. But then when it's a token payment, you've got the administrative challenge of, okay, so do we tell them, all right, when you reach $50, we'll write you a check, and then some folks will never reach $50, and so it's kind of like one of those situations where you said you're going to share revenue, but really they're probably never going to get any revenue. So there's all those challenges that go along with it.
I think that's exactly right. And this advertising has some challenges. You referenced the user side maybe being the listener side being surmountable. I mean, I definitely have an orientation toward advertising. It's a little bit interruptive, and in a lot of ways, some of how it's implemented is a little bit disrespectful of the listener. So I think if we went in that direction, we'd want to be pretty thoughtful about the listener as well as being additive to the ecosystem and not kind of just riding on the back of others. And Rob, you alluded to a whole number of other thoughts, which are definitely on the radar screen. Again, I think there's standard moves like upgraded versions of the app, some in-app features, things that are additive, like that Hear More button if it's linking to paid content, and we're helping facilitate that to ease that transaction, some sort of commission, enterprise solutions. I think there's a host of things. There's not a dearth of ideas. It's more about building up the community and then finding out which of those fits and is additive to the community is how we think about it. I mean, we're a business, so we'll definitely need to figure that out, but we don't want to have a solution before the kind of community really has had a chance to gel.
Well, I know that the whole conversation about advertising models is probably a topic that we should do in an entire separate episode of this show, because I have some thoughts about where advertising is going in the bigger picture of things. As you look at kind of the newer technology coming along, I know not everybody can build a successful business around advertising, and that's been the problem going back to the early .com times too. Is everybody's business model was advertising, and in the end, not everybody could do it. And it caused a lot of companies to go out of business. So there needs to be another approach, right? Direct purchase isn't always the right choice either. So there needs to be some sort of, especially, I'm starting to think podcasting is more of a social media than it is a kind of a direct kind of one-to-many type
broadcast
of media that we're more used to in radio and television. And with that comes opportunities to do other things with your community too. Value exchanges between members of the community, that maybe there could be shared revenue that's shared with the source that brought that community together. So it's not being done today in any way that I'm aware of, but I think that the local economy, I think, is another aspect too, and of how to connect this up. And I'm kind of going way afield on this topic, but it just feels like that there's other ways that we can monetize companies like Clammr and podcasting that maybe go beyond the assumptions that we make today.
Rob, just as a little tease, in 55 minutes, I'm revealing for the first time to about 20 shows this idea I've been percolating for a year. I don't know if did I share with you? I don't think I did.
I don't think so.
I've kept it pretty top secret, and I've made 20 shows essentially agree to
I have a few ideas too. I don't know. It'd be interesting to talk to you about it to see if we're thinking the same thing.
No, I don't. Yeah. It's the thing is, it's so simple, it's stupid, and it's. I think, and that's why I'm keeping it so secret because.
Oh, Todd, give it to us. I want to hear this. I hope you're not going to leave it at that.
Oh, I am. I'm going to leave it at that. But I think if people are listening to my show within the next couple of weeks, they'll probably. Or my other tech show, they'll probably figure it out. But I'm just, I think I'm onto something. But it requires some trust amongst friends in order to do it. So that's all I can say at that point. I know I'm horrible.
That's quite the cliffhanger.
But when we're ready to announce it, we will. But I have to test the concept.
I was going to say the only way the concept is going to be successful is if everybody knows about it. So
if I get 20 of my best podcaster friends to participate and we are able to test it out and see if it's viable, if it will scale. We think it's viable. The key is will it scale, and then the partners that we're bringing on board too are critical in the scale department of it. So, and it is a new way, and and it's only going to fit in certain type of shows.
Well, I think we need another way. I mean, we've been hitting our heads against this wall for years, Todd. I mean, of this ad model in podcasting, though it's being done successfully,
right?
Really doesn't fit the medium. I mean, it's trying to shoehorn something in that the audience doesn't like and doesn't want.
Well, I don't necessarily think the audience doesn't like it. I had one.
Well, I guess it depends on how it's done.
But,
But the problem is that we're coming into an era where there's going to be a lot of people trying to do what they've always done, right? In this medium.
Yeah.
And the problem is not everybody can have a successful revenue around advertising,
right,
and that's just the reality.
Because the shows aren't big enough.
Yeah, so how do we pay for people's time to do this? How do we make it, economically viable for people to put energy into creating niche content like this? There needs to be a new model. There needs to be a new way that people can natively do things that can generate some economic activity that benefits all of us.
Yeah.
That doesn't involve having to work with a Walmart, I hate to say, nothing necessarily bad about Walmart, but it seems like a lot of the big companies in this space that are moving into the space, that's their gold standard of who they're trying to reach, right?
Right.
Is a big brand advertiser that spends, $300 million a year, and that's the focus of who their business model is, and that's just, I think that's archaic and a backward way of looking at things in the bigger picture of things.
Well, Rob, I've always looked out for the little guy, so
I know you have, and I think we're coming into a time now when local economies, there's an opportunity there. I mean, I've been involved in the internet space for many years, and it was always the sweet spot, right, is local economies, and we're starting to see it happen. And when I say local economies, I say the digitization of local economic activity, because the internet and the web have spent most of its life as a global and national medium, but it has all of the trappings of being a medium that can help improve all of our lives and our local lives, and it just hasn't been there yet.
But I think the challenge with local is still scale.
It is, and clearly is an issue in podcasting because it's very reflective.
Right.
Of the bigger issue is that in any given market, I mean, I've talked about this multiple times. I mean, podcasters will launch a show that the host is like a DJ from a local radio station. They'll come home, they'll build a studio, they'll create a show about Seattle or something like that, kind of like what they used to do on the radio.
Yep.
Invariably, after 2 or 3 months, and I've seen this happen multiple times, that show will wind up becoming a national focus show because there's not enough listeners in any given market to justify doing a local show about Seattle.
Right.
And until we reach that tipping point, right, of and I believe we're getting close, right? I mean, you look at Uber, Airbnb, you look at more and more local services being serviced by the internet, and you're going to have that opportunity, I think, in with the smart agent technologies coming in our phones, where these agents are going to help us find and discover things on a local basis more and more. I mean, even like Waze is another one, that connects up local people with each other while they're driving around their cars. Though I think it's dangerous, but it's just indicative of the evolution of of this medium and the internet in general is to service our lives at a local level.
But I think, too, from the local standpoint, from a content creation standpoint, it's very, very hard because you need a superstar. Otherwise, the average guy or the average man or woman, they oftentimes don't trust the dude in a small studio like this. And
I think it may come down. I don't know, sorry to interrupt, but Rob, you referenced something earlier. There's community and there's local. Those are sometimes the same, sometimes different. I think you do trust somebody who's part of a community with you, even if it's a small community. And maybe that's where, Todd, some of that trust can come in.
I went using Hawaii as an example. We had 10 years ago, we had a local podcasting community, which just kind of ironically has seen a resurgence this week. And that's things happening. But I had that community before was pretty strong here. We probably had 20, 25, and we had some true superstars that were creating content in this local area. They had audience sizes that people would dream for today. And but they're these huge advocates of the local community. And I won't tell you how many times I went to the Hawaii Tourism Authority and the hotels and the ecosystem here that drives. I live in a state where people come to vacation. This is what we're known for: sunshine and trade winds and beautiful girls on beaches and bikinis, and this is what this state is. And you could not talk any sense into those travel authorities to say, here you have local people that are promoting Hawaii on their shows. Why aren't you, and maybe their thought was, well, they're already talking about Hawaii. But on my tech show, I don't necessarily we talk about Hawaii this morning about the weather, but I don't really talk about Hawaii as a destination. But just think of the advantage that, the reach that we could have had for the tourism authority. But they were, oh no, we're going to spend $5 million in Japan and $2 million in
TV, right?
in China. Yeah, and we're going to spend that money on TV and mass radio, but they wouldn't even carve out, a 4 or even 5-figure budget for, local podcasters to promote Hawaii. It was pure insanity to me. It still is. Because you think about, every content creator lives somewhere, and they reach a global audience. Just think about talking about there's always something about a community that's cool. And if you can promote that. But I think the local stuff still is hard from a global scale. Not from a global scale.
I mean, you're entirely right, Todd. It's not there today.
Yeah.
It's not where it needs to be today. But I do see glimmers of, this augmented reality stuff. I mean, you start thinking about how all this stuff is going to converge into transforming our lives. I mean, it's really amazing to think about what the internet could do to our culture and our society in another 10 years. I mean, it's amazing what it's done in the last 10 years. What is the next 10 years going to look like? And I'm hoping that it's for the better, though there's always downsides to this stuff, right? It's never as clear cut as this is great, but it's the reality that we have. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. I mean, I keep looking at my smartphones and I'm seeing capabilities coming into those things that are going to transform our lives into our cars. We're talking about autonomous cars, and the implications of podcast consumption in autonomous cars is also a pretty compelling thing too when you think about it. Content consumption in vehicles, if you're not having to drive the car, is kind of wide open, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that you're exactly right, Todd. That I think that the growth on this is going to continue to go up. The good thing about young people, maybe they're not consuming as much podcast today, and I've said this before, is that the good thing is they get older.
That's right.
Usually older people like audio more.
Now, one thing too, taking the conversation back to Clammer a little bit, and it's kind of a, it's not a direct cross-link discussion here. What I'm trying to do is talk about something we did in the past. Was when we first started, my idea was that, and I had this, and Rob, it was way before its time.
Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah.
Is I wanted content creators that were local who were, and we called it the Podcaster News Network. It's now podcasternews.com. It's actually about podcasting news. But before, it was actually a podcast news site. I tried to make a CNN, but each of the content creators was contributing local-only content.
Local. It's like Audio Patch. What Patch was AOL.
Yeah, there's some guys that are doing it now, or yeah. So anyway, we tried, and there was a couple shows out of Hollywood, and there was and we had I don't know, maybe 200 shows that were on, and it was abysmal failure because it was too early. There wasn't, we had a great idea. And a great, but it just wasn't. Yeah, it was really 10 years before its time.
You could imagine somebody. I mean, I think that's why you're making the link. Like, the creation is now super simple. You have a widget that actually aggregates all of those accounts that people are just throwing out those reports, and then somebody just goes and presses play.
Right.
We actually have someone in the Philippines, interestingly enough, Martin Andanar, who's he leads kind of digital for the number 3 broadcaster there, but he just took it on himself to do ASEAN news, and he's starting to pull together this collective of folks for each of the ASEAN countries, so Vietnam news, Philippines news, etc. Exactly to that point, because it's pretty easy to do. They're pretty small little things. Right. You just kind of throw it up there when there's something newsworthy. A lot of Manny Pacquiao stuff coming through, what Martin's doing right now.
There's here in Hawaii, we've got this thing here, and this is where I'm thinking I'm going to be doing some experimentation. I bought a website, and I haven't done anything with it. I posted 1 or 2 blog posts to it. But they're putting this $10 billion rail system here in Hawaii.
My Lord, I didn't know Hawaii could fit rail.
Yeah, well, that's my point.
It's a traffic problem.
And I'm not a fan.
Where's that gonna live?
I'm not a fan, largely because I'm a taxpayer. I'm not a fan. My wife is, so we have interesting conversations at the dinner table. But anyway, it's just getting started, and it's it's been a couple of years, and it's just above. It's rail, it's steel on steel, and it's above. It's a raised platform. It's just a blight. And so I could think that maybe this would be where I could use Clammr. I could start looking for people that are taking video snippets of construction and, and easily catalog that into a news stream.
And you can take a picture with it. One of my favorite things is that Humans of New York series, where the guy just walks around and takes pictures of people in New York, and he often has quotes from them underneath. But you could actually take the little picture, and it's like a slideshow. And one thing that's neat we've seen in the app is about half of usage is actually people staring at the phone. Because they just like to veg out and look at this little slideshow, and you can Tinder these things, right? So if you don't like something, you just swipe it with your finger.
Right.
And it's this behavior that's really neat to see that they're doing this, treating it a bit visually. Yeah, that's exactly right, Todd. One thing that's a little further down the map that, again, is kind of tickles more of my, because I like shiny new objects thing, is geotagging these things. So the same way we have filters around hashtags, etc., being able to have creators geotag them, and then you can start pulling together geotagged content, which goes with news, but also certainly goes with experiences, whether it's a tourist experience, or you can even think of things like music. Some folks putting together a playlist for a particular beautiful spot in Hawaii. So there are a few interesting directions this will go in over time. But yeah, the use case you just brought up is a super simple, hey, I don't need to invest a whole lot. It's kind of like what Elsie's doing. She just was like, I have an idea for a podcast, but I'm not going to create a whole podcast. Let me just throw up some Clammers with the proto content of that podcast, basically.
Hey, speaking of bright, shiny things, we probably should talk a little bit about Spotify and their announcement this week. So, Rob, any thoughts? We kind of knew it was coming.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been rumors about it for many, many months. I think it's just a continuation of a trend line that's been going for a while now. It's kind of been a little bit under the radar to some extent. I think it was really started with places like TuneIn, excuse me, adding podcasts, and then you had like Slacker adding spoken word content, and then you had the acquisition of Stitcher into Deezer, and then now you're seeing Spotify jumping into it. It's this. In some ways, I view it as a little bit of a going back to what podcasting was in the early days, and I can draw some other analogies to early days of podcasting to what's going on today. But really, if you look at iTunes, iTunes had podcasting and music together, right? Now, granted, there was video and stuff. If I go back to my Zune days, Zune had music and podcast together. We went through this stretch of time for 4 or 5 years when a lot of these platforms were separating these things. And I'm not necessarily talking about Apple, but Apple did that to some extent by creating the separate podcast app and all this kind of stuff. There was this separation that happened between spoken word and music, and it was really more that happened around music services. And this trend line that we're seeing happen right now is around the rebundling of spoken word with music. And that has always been part of the radio experience. So many millions, hundreds of millions of people are used to having talk and music next to each other on the radio dial. So in some ways, this is a continuation or a rebirth, essentially, of that partnership that's existed between spoken word and music. And we're just seeing it play out now. It's time. I think that the music services have reached kind of a little bit of a plateau. I think they've been struggling with music royalty costs. They're looking to grow, and the only other piece that they can really bolt on or add that is additive, that doesn't add a lot of cost, is spoken word. So that's kind of what this is all about, And now, granted, Todd and I, you and I have talked about the changes that come with this. Are pretty profound as well, and it's more of a technical thing, and listeners won't really notice a whole lot, but it's kind of on the back end, right?
Right.
A lot of these companies, and the same kind of deal that Spreaker did with iHeartRadio, though iHeartRadio is another example of this, is where these streaming services want to host the media files. So, it somewhat breaks the model that exists around podcasting today, where the content is hosted one place and it's distributed and it's a pass-through everywhere, right? But more and more, I believe this is going to happen more and more, is that the individual services are going to want to host the files themselves, and that creates this complication of business models. Todd, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I all I say is, talking with the Spotify folks, I think that they are a little overwhelmed by the community response. Yeah. There was a couple of things that they were. I'll be careful here. I think they were. They had some assumptions, and I think that you're going to see probably some commentary coming out of them in the next couple of days to clarify some stuff. And I think every podcaster should just relax. There's going to be plenty of ways to get on the Spotify platform. You're not going to have to be tied to a specific service. So I think that that's critical, and I think it's also critical that content creators realize that owning their accounts and that type of stuff is important. So basically, they're going to make it's going to make the process is going to be real good for everyone. I think the challenge where in an early beta is that they're definitely trying to curate as much as they can initially, and we'll see what happens over time. But I think that they have to be able to control the experience. So I've already heard some content creators complaining that they're downloading their media and they're re-encoding it. And really what they have to do is, and this is just because, as you're driving your car, sometimes the cell phone connection drops out. And you may lose a call. Well, these companies have to adjust the audio stream based upon your available bandwidth. So they want you to be able to listen no matter where you're at. And if you're feeding a 128 kilobit file as the source file, and you go into low area and you're actually doing an on-demand request versus something that you've already cached, you're going to probably not be able to listen to that content all the way through. So I don't know.
Todd, you're exactly right. I mean, it's streaming versus download. Really, if you really want to play it to its ultimate end. I mean, I've been involved in this type of stuff.
But it's true. It's true streaming. And that's the key there. It's true streaming. It's not video on demand or audio on demand.
Yeah.
It's truly streaming.
Yeah. And Stitcher went through some of the same issues here, and there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from the past here, and how the community has reacted to things like this. Stitcher got a black eye for doing exactly the same thing. I was with the company back in 2005 to 2007 that really kind of, in some ways, I don't know if it pioneered this concept of caching and then re-encoding and redistributing. But back in 2005 to 2007, I was working for a company called Melodio and was working on a product called Mobilecast. And we were trying to do audio podcasts to semi-smartphones back in those days. Those phones were not, like Razor phones, were not exactly the smartest phones in the world back in those days. It was in the pre-smartphone era, but it was not all those phones could support MP3. So the concept of re-encoding and redistributing happened for a very practical reason. There was limited bandwidth and there was lack of codec support. So you had to re-encode it, and that's basically what Stitcher did, was take the concept of Melodio and duplicate that. But as we moved into this new era of ubiquitous Wi-Fi and online LTE and 4G connections, the bandwidth issue became a little bit less of an issue. The speed was there and all this stuff. Now, granted, we're all capped mostly on how much we can use, but the issue started to go away, right, of re-encoding. But you have still the issue is not everybody is going to be able to be connected effectively at all times. There's no perfect solution here.
Right.
And that's going to be one of the issues that Spotify runs into is as people use this content, and I'm sure they're used to it with the music side, so it isn't something new to them. But if there's a way that they can cache the content to be able to bridge divides in connectivity, then that's a good way of doing it. And that's exactly what Melodio and Stitcher tried to do. But it came with a price, and it came with a black eye in the community.
So we will see what happens. I don't think anything's going to happen I think people are going to, it's a woohoo, and then it's going to be a couple of weeks, and maybe in a couple of months before things really get up and moving.
Well, and I think they're going to wind up, and other players that have jumped into this, they're going to have to open it up and accept submissions.
Oh, and people shouldn't think that they're not.
Yeah.
I
think that
it's being hinted.
The impression.
They are not making that impression. Other companies are making that impression falsely.
Oh no, I get you, but that impression is out there, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, the conversation is it's going to quickly become the second largest podcast consumption platform.
We'll see.
that's the assumption. But the
We'll
problem
see.
is that until they get to full scale of a catalog, that may be difficult to reach.
I don't necessarily. We'll see if they move the needle. We'll see if they do. There's been a lot of players that have not moved the needle. The only one that moved the needle so far has been Stitcher. So,
but they've been doing it for
right
8 years.
Well, there's also a question of if you're the number 2 in this particular market, it's a rather distant number 2 compared to Apple.
but if Stitcher, if Stitcher only moved the market 3.5%,
exactly,
to total consumption, okay, so I'll take the additional listeners. Don't get me wrong, but are they new listeners or have they migrated? That's, I'm hoping they're new listeners.
Well, you have to think about Spotify. I mean, Todd, I completely see your point. I mean, I think a good example of it is TuneIn. TuneIn's got 50 million active users.
And they're not even budging the needle in the podcast space.
But that is very true. And I've talked to those folks many times over the years, but their podcast experience is not optimal either. So, and I think one of the challenges that Spotify is going to learn pretty quickly is they're going to have a full-featured solution. They can't just do it just streaming. That's going to clip their market opportunity. It's going to have to be a full-featured solution. It can't be halfway. People are used to doing things a certain way with this content. If they can't do it, they'll go to somewhere where they can.
I ask people all the time. They get excited. I say, "How many people have you got listening to your show on TuneIn? How many do you have on Spotify and not Spotify and Stitcher?" And they are, unless they're running our stats, they oftentimes don't know. And when they do, it's like then the conversation ends. It's like, oh well, and really, I don't get me wrong. I'm excited to see them in the space. Very excited to see them in the space. More. I'm a distribution kind of guy. I think we invented distribution. We were leading that, and I'm really, I'm excited to see them in the space. So we'll see. I hope they really move the needle. If they do, it'll be good for all of us.
Yeah.
And
I just don't see downloading going away anytime soon.
It's not. And when the iOS app still owns 85, 6, 7% of the total space, and it's split between on-demand and folks that are still downloading it.
Well, it's still mostly downloading. It's 2/3 downloading.
So it's, it isn't going away anytime soon. Because, believe it or not, we're geeks. We love to use our phones and Macs. And, I look at my bandwidth usage, and I'm right up to the wire every month. Most people don't. Most people are very conservative in their bandwidth they use on their mobile phones.
What are you doing on that phone, Todd?
You know what? Come on. We all live on our devices. I've got 5 people that share 20 gigs, and, this is my business phone. So the 5 primaries at Raw Voice, we share 20 gigs, and we almost run it out every month.
Wow.
And that's not, hold on. That's not half the story.
Oh, that's not how, oh boy.
So 12 gigs on my MiFi. 6 gigs on a Sprint device. So,
boy, Todd, you must have a big online internet connectivity budget.
Oh, you don't even want to know what my bill is.
Wow.
I don't even have that much connectivity in my life. Yeah.
Well, when you're, I'm mobile a lot, so this is my lifeline.
Yeah.
If you don't leave the house, Rob, you don't need this.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Hey, we are already here at the 90-minute mark. Holy cow.
Yeah.
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 But anyway, it's cool to see them. Anything else that came up this week that we need to talk about?
I'd say we talked about the big ones.
Yeah, it was big.
Yeah.
So people are all excited and jumping over themselves. So it's cool. It's another player. Well, but the question is, when's Pandora going to come on?
Yeah, at our panel at New Media Expo, you know what I put up on there on that big slide.
That's right. So
and Rob was on the panel there biting his lip, I think. Yeah.
So we'll see, and if they come on, it's they're then they're all going to have to figure out how to. They're going to think they're going to need to compete with each other. So maybe that'll drive features.
Yeah.
But what they all need to figure out is who they're really competing with is Apple and iOS and the podcasting app. Once they figure that out, that's who they're competing against. They're not competing against each other. So
I think it's apparent when you search for podcast and there's a whole screen takeover for the Apple app. So, right.
Or you're on your phone and you come to a podcast site and you click on the iTunes link and everyone knows that and it loads. You don't see you don't see a tune-in link. You don't see other links to other services. People don't put those up there unless they're using them or they're hosting with them maybe. So,
but Todd, I think that the growth in the space is on Android.
Oh well, who's the biggest fan of growing Android right now?
I know.
And we're having more discussions with more Android developers, and little by little, we're going to get them. We're going to get them all on one click at some point here soon. Mm-hmm. So think they have to be. Some of them. It's again. Developers are just they're developers. And part of the challenge too is some of the developers are I think what some of the app developers have to be real careful of is they're running themselves at risk. If they don't be careful, most of them are pulling from the Apple iTunes directory. Most of them are feeding their apps that way, and to me that is a very bad business model. If you are an app developer and you're feeding your site or anything from the Apple Store, because what happens if Apple, locks that access down? Especially if they feel that it's starting to feed the Android community and they're getting growth with the Android community and taking away from market share, they'll lock those Android apps out that quick.
Well, there's apps now that are still tapping into the Zune podcast catalog on Windows Phone today, and that's going to get shut down.
Wow.
It's just a matter of time. I think probably next year.
So that being said, and it's maybe this is self-serving. We do have a library, and it's very large, and you'll start to see it next week. We're finally ready. So, but. It is what it is. Anyway, I think we need to roll.
Yep.
Any idea next week, Rob, on who we have lined up?
No, but I've got some interesting candidates, so I'll let everybody know.
All right. And of course, why don't you give everyone your final 411 on where they can find you, Parviz?
Sure. So Clammer spelled Clammr. No vowel at the end, and you can find us in the iOS App Store. Just type in Clammer. You can go to Clammr.com. We're an iOS app right now, and we have a web-based publisher portal, and you can always reach me at Parviz@Clammr.com.
And so we'll do one clarification for me. Is the publisher platform available for all users?
It is. In fact, you can register an account there, so we often tell Android-only folks who are creators, hey, well, you can go ahead, and there are a number of them who've gone ahead and published through the publisher portal, and you get a baseline user experience there. You can listen to the stream, but you can't engage in any of the social behavior or any of the customization that you get in the app.
When is the Clammr Android app coming?
We're going to do the web version first, and that's fully mobile responsive. So Android app will be really end of the year. We're making the current big push on the web version, and that'll be late spring, early summer. You'll be seeing that.
All right, very, very cool. Well,
could I ask you one other question about
ahead,
that?
Rob.
Are you going to be tapping into certain apps on Android, or can you talk about that yet?
When you say tapping into certain apps, say more.
To get access to content feeds. Like you do in the iOS app.
We're looking at that. I think I'll come back to you maybe on that. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And apologize to the entire audience. I was a little distracted first 20 minutes of the show trying to get the screens up, and it just it's one of those things. But
all's well that ends well, Todd.
Yeah,
we ended up getting the screen. It was great.
Yeah, I was ducking my head here. Two different laptops to get it going, but got to figure out why it doesn't work on this machine. But you can reach, and of course, Parviz, thanks for coming on very, very much. I definitely appreciate your time and your input this morning, and getting a deep dive into Clammr. And of course,
super fun.
If you guys have comments, is there a good way for them to contact you? Is it on Twitter at Clammr, or where's the best place?
So at Clammr app on Twitter. That's a super easy way. I'm always on that. And the app itself has a feedback mechanism that goes to the whole team. We personally read that, and it's just support@Clammr.com. And again, the email's parviz@Clammr.com or info@Clammr.com. I basically see anything that'll come to any of the email addresses. So.
At some point, that'll change.
I hope not. I mean, I love it. I mean, we're really trying to build a community. So
when you wake up
very,
with
very responsive.
When you wake up with 1,000 emails in your inbox. No, I'm just. So anyway, folks, you can reach. And if you want to fill our inbox up, you can do so. But it's Todd or Rob at newmediashow.com. You can follow me at Geek News on Twitter. Rob.
Yeah, at Rob Greenlee on Twitter, and that's 2 E's at the end, and robgreenlee.com, and you can definitely see what I'm up to by going over to Spreaker.com.
So it's been a lot of fun, and for the audience that's been here, thanks for hanging out with us, and for those of you that are catching it on demand, we definitely appreciate you listening to the show as well, and we appreciate your feedback and commentary that's been coming in lately. Everyone take care. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Hang on one second, Rob.